Car manufacturers are always looking for something different, whether this be an innovation, more performance, or a bold design. However, sometimes car companies decide to put their wildest ideas into reality, make something crazy just for the sake of it, and sometimes these cars even end up in production. This is a list of some of these cars that took a mental idea and ran with it. As always, if you enjoy, please like and subscribe. The first car up is quite possibly the most insane hot hatchback ever made. The Volkswagen Golf GTI W12 650 was shown off in 2007, the GTI Festival in Wörthersee, Austria. Just 8 weeks before the event, it was decided that a showstopper was required to combine elements from across the VW group. The basic shell of a Mark V GTI was used, but only the production car's doors, bonnet and lights were carried over. The body was significantly wider, the suspension was 3 inches lower, and enormous tyres were fitted. The chassis was obviously reworked, while the interior was stripped back to give it a racing vibe and save weight. You may be wondering what the parts from across the VW group were. Well, the most notable is the twin-turbo W12 engine from the Bentley Continental GT. With 641 horsepower, the GTI W12 650 was good for 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds and a top speed of 201 miles per hour. Due to the Golf's relatively compact dimensions, the engine was mounted behind the driver, similar to the legendary Renault Clio V6, which did actually make it into production, although it was never as audacious as the Wild Child Golf. The roof was made from a carbon fibre composite, and it borrowed the rear brakes and axle from a Lamborghini Gallardo, with the front brakes from an Audi RS4 and the gearbox of a VW Phaeton. All in all, the one-off Golf is a ridiculous idea, made even more ridiculous that it was actually turned into a functioning car in just 2 months. Following the theme of sticking 12-cylinder engines in cars that shouldn't have one, in 2000, BMW revealed something astonishing. The X5 Le Mans featured a 700 horsepower V12, the German brand's Le Mans winner from 1999. It held the SUV Nordschleife record for nearly 19 years with a time of 7 minutes and 42.253 seconds. The performance figures are ludicrous for an SUV from the early noughties, as the X5 Le Mans could accelerate to 62 miles per hour in just 4.7 seconds and reach a top speed of 193. There were plenty of modifications to allow the deranged X5 to be as quick as it was. The bonnet was made from carbon fibre, while the body was much wider than usual. The tyres were predictably much larger than those of a standard X5, and there was an almost 50-50 weight distribution. To aid handling, the chassis was lowered by 30mm. The interior featured 4 bucket seats. The BMW X5 Le Mans is obviously another ridiculous car, but it helped to rationalise the somewhat oxymoronic concept of performance SUVs, leading to the BMW X5M, which helped to set the bar as far as the idea of fast SUVs go. The Aston Martin Signet was developed purely to avoid emissions targets that would have been expensive had the British manufacturer not complied. The Signet was a rebadged Toyota IQ with a plush interior. A 1.3 litre 97 horsepower engine isn't exactly interesting and not particularly representative of Aston Martin. However, one customer decided they wanted to spice up their Signet a little bit. The result, the one and only Signet V8. The 4.7 litre 430 horsepower V8 from the Vantage S has been just about squeezed into the bonnet, albeit with a few adjustments. It's also paired with a 7-speed gearbox from the Vantage S, and all the power is sent to the rear wheels. Visually, the changes are evident. Carbon fibre wheel arches stick out massively due to the greatly widened track width, while the wheels are 3 inches larger in diameter than on the standard Signet. There are also twin exhaust pipes to let the V8 sing properly. It weighs just 1,375 kilos, meaning it has a power to weight ratio of 313 bhp per tonne. This results in a 0 to 60 mile per hour time of just 4.2 seconds and a top speed of 170 miles an hour, 60 miles per hour more than the bog standard Signet. There are also massive brakes, and much of the braking system is carried over from the V8 Vantage S. The interior features a roll cage, fire extinguisher and Recaro bucket seats, while the Alcantara steering wheel is removable. The dash is made of carbon fibre, the instrument cluster is from Avantage. It truly is a far cry from the posh city car that Aston first made. It is an outlandish one-off, though it does completely defy the emissions lowering objective of the original Signet. The next car, the Renault Espace F1, might just be the craziest on this list. The French company took its revolutionary MPV, now in its second generation, and made it as close to a Formula 1 car as it could. Built by Matra, it used a carbon fibre chassis and a carbon fibre reinforced Espace body, albeit with quite a few changes to make it way more aggressive and muscular. It also used carbon ceramic brakes, now quite common in modern performance cars, but they were very rare at the time, allowing it to stop from 186 miles per hour in under 600 meters. The most balmy feature by far was a 3.5 litre Renault RS5 V10 engine, straight from the Williams FW15C from 1993. It had more power than the engine used in the race car, with 789 horses and 520 foot-pounds of torque. This engine was mounted in the middle of the car for better weight distribution, just like an F1 car. The power was sent to the rear wheels by a 6-speed semi-automatic gearbox used in the Williams that the Espace F1 drew its engine from. This incredibly potent combination allowed the Espace F1 to complete 0 to 62 miles per hour in 2.8 seconds, 0 to 124 in 6.9, and reach a top speed of 194 miles per hour, 1 mile an hour more than the top speed of the V12 BMW X5 Le Mans mentioned earlier. Despite the obvious modifications, the Renault Espace F1 could still seat 4. Unfortunately, only one example was ever made, and it currently resides in Matra's museum in France. The Toyota Serra is perhaps the least crazy car to appear in this video, but it's still somewhat bewildering as to why the Japanese giant decided to put the coupe into production. On the surface, it appears relatively unassuming with a sensible design. This continues with a choice of engine, a 1.5 litre inline-4 with 104 horsepower and 132 Nm of torque. A 4-speed auto and 5-speed manual were offered. It shared its chassis, suspension, steering and brakes with the Paseo and Starlet. However, the standout features were the doors. For some reason, Toyota decided the Serra needed butterfly doors, which were the inspiration for the butterfly doors found on the iconic McLaren F1. The windows curve upward to form a glass roof, meaning the cabin is light. The rear glass is also extensive, giving the Serra a recognisable look from behind. The interior was pretty plush, with leather-wrapped bucket seats. It was also decently practical, with a large boot for its size. The Toyota Serra is perhaps the tamest car here, but has developed a bit of a cult following for the inclusion of its distinctive doors. It's still wild that a manufacturer known mainly for making sensible, reliable transport decided to design the Serra in such a way, while giving it such disappointing performance. Unlike the cars up to now, the Serra actually went into production, and 15,852 were sold over 5 years. The Vauxhall Carlton was pretty standard family transport in the UK, was a common sight in the 80s and 90s. The GSI 3000 was a performance range topper, launched in 1986 with 177 horsepower and a top speed of 134 miles per hour. Power was upped to 204 in 1990. This was quick for a saloon at the time, but wasn't mind-blowing, unlike the very special car that was based on it. The Lotus Carlton was developed, as the name suggests, alongside Lotus. Under the bonnet was a 3.6 litre straight 6 with 2 turbochargers. It produced 377 horsepower and 419 foot-pounds of torque, giving it a headline top speed of 176 miles per hour. It also accelerated to 62 miles per hour in just 5.4 seconds, faster than the Ferrari Testarossa. It really was a beast in a businessman's suit, but apart from the slightly widened arches and rear spoiler, there were few visual differences. The interior was pretty plush for a Vauxhall, but again, didn't scream performance. Lotus also developed bespoke suspension, and the 6-speed manual was derived from the Corvette ZR1. There was also a limited slip differential from the Holden Commodore and larger brakes. The ridiculous performance the Lotus Carlton offered even led to calls to ban it. It was used by criminals in the UK. As police cars struggled to keep up, the tabloids pressured the government to ban them, and the discussion made it to Parliament. The media furore helped to cement the Carlton's cult status, as did tales about one in the West Midlands which was stolen. Fitted with the private plate 40RA, it was used in a space of ram raids, and tens of thousands of pounds of goods were stolen. It was so quick that the gangs that used it targeted a shop across the road from a police station because they knew the cops had no chance of catching them. After a helicopter was deployed once to chase them, the car disappeared and was later found in a nearby canal. The legend still lives on, as the original owner bought a Vauxhall Lotus Carlton and has since returned the now iconic number plate to the car that made it so famous. It's this story that is part of why the very special Carlton is so epic. It's a high price of £48,000 at the time, which is nearly £137,000 today. Only 286 were ever sold in the UK, making them incredibly rare. Examples fetch six figures nowadays due to the rarity and notoriety of one of the coolest cars to ever come out of Britain. There we have it. That's my list of some of the craziest running and driving cars ever made. It's great to see that manufacturers were up to make something a bit balmy as a means of promotion, to test new technology, or simply for the fun of it. Unfortunately, these kind of cars are less prevalent nowadays. Instead, we mainly see wacky concepts with giant screens and no steering wheel, but at least it was fun while it lasted.